The topic of our project is capital punishment. Capital punishment dates back as far as the 18th century BC in the Code of King Hammurabi. It's carried out by means of crucifixion, drowning, beating to death, burning alive, and impalement. In 10th century AD, hanging became the usual method of execution in Britain. Other methods of this time period included boiling, burning at the stake, beheading, and drawing and quartering. Offenses could range anywhere from marrying a Jew or treason to cutting down a tree. America's use of the death penalty was greatly influenced by Britain. The first recorded execution in the U.S. was in Jamestown, Virginia in 1608. In 1794, Pennsylvania repealed the death penalty for all offenses but first-degree murder. In the early 19th century, many states reduced numbers of capital crimes and built state penitentiaries. In 1846, Michigan became the first state to only use the death penalty for treason. Rhode Island and Wisconsin completely abolished it. The electric chair was introduced by New York in 1888. In 1924, the use of cyanide gas was introduced in Nevada. From the 1920s to the 1940s, the death sentence became popular again due to the Great Depression and Prohibition. In the 1930s, there was the most recorded executions in U.S. history. In the late 1960s, the Supreme Court began... In 1977, Oklahoma becomes the first state to adopt lethal injection as means of execution. The first person executed by lethal injection was in Texas in 1982, and as of August 2017, capital punishment is still legal in 31 states.
All right, so throughout the U.S. prison system, there has been 5 main execution methods, which are the lethal injection, the gas chamber, firing squad, hanging, and the electric chair. So first up, until the 1890s, the primary method of execution in the United States was hanging. So the procedure, you would just tie the hands and legs of the prisoner and to be secured, and you just hang them. In 1924, the use of cyanide gas was used. In the first case was in Nevada, and the inmate name was John, and they botched his execution, so they had to build a gas chamber, so that's where it came from. The use of the firing squad in the U.S. was more of a military method, as they would use it a lot in the Civil War and also in World War II. The first electric chair was built in 1888, and the first execution with the electric chair was in 1890. Today, the prison systems do not really use the electrocution method, and the last case and the last electrocution method is the lethal injection, which was introduced in 1977. Currently, it's the most used injection in the United States.
Currently in the United States, there are still 31 states with the death penalty. There are 19 states that have completely abolished the death penalty, Illinois being one of them. If you look at when each individual state has abolished them, you will notice that most have done so very recently, meaning there could potentially be a lot more states that get rid of it very soon. There are also 4 states, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Washington, and Oregon, that are death penalty states with gubernatorial moratoria, which means that the state governor essentially is putting the death penalty on hold because he or she knows that there can be flaws in the justice system. Delaware is the latest state to abolish the death penalty in 2016. The United States is one of 58 countries in the world who still have the death penalty. The majority of the countries with the death penalty reside in Africa and the Middle East, although there are still some major countries such as China, Japan, and India who still use the death penalty. However, our neighbors Canada and Mexico, along with almost all of Europe, have abolished the death penalty completely. The leader in executions last year was China, with upwards of 1,634 executions. The United States only had 28. Reports also indicated that at least 9 people under the age of 18 were executed in 2015, 4 in Iran and 5 in Pakistan. People continue to be sentenced to death for offenses that do not meet the most serious crimes threshold of intentional killing as set in international law. Offenses included drug-related crimes in 12 different countries, both in Asia and the Middle East.
Many people may view the death penalty as inhumane, but there's actually some various benefits that come along with it. In general, using the death penalty is a great long-term deterrence from criminal behavior, and as you can imagine, death being a consequence is also a better way to serve justice and also better deter criminals from doing criminal things. And there's also a lot of evidence that serves as the death penalty being a good way for closure of the victims of the families who have suffered from the criminals. And as far as prisons and jails go, the death penalty contributes to the overpopulation, and there's only so much space that can be in prisons and jails, and using the death penalty can help stop the overpopulation of those things. And there's also evidence that some people think that the criminal justice system has more sympathy for criminals rather than the victims. So using the death penalty will better ensure for the victims and the community that they are actually on their side rather than the criminals. And overall, as far as paroles and probation and escapes go, using the death penalty, that's just another chance for criminals to have a chance to kill. So using the death penalty will further prevent that.
Okay, for some cons of the death penalty, first off, like two of the biggest arguments for the death penalty are that it deters crime and that it's more expensive to keep a criminal alive in jail for years than it is to just execute them. But a paper published by the Northwestern Law Review found in Florida that it costs $3.2 million to execute a criminal, and that's from the time of arrest to up until the execution, versus $600,000 for a life sentence without parole. In Texas, they found $2.3 million per execution, which was 3 times higher than a life sentence, and similar numbers were found in most states that were involved in this study. Information gathered by the Death Penalty Information Center found that there is also a high correlation of racial bias in death penalty cases, wherein 76% of the victims of the crimes sought in death penalty cases were white, and they found that you had upwards of a 3 times higher chance of getting convicted of execution if the person that you harmed was a white person. Also, they found that there was no discernible correlation between states with the death penalty and without the death penalty had to deterrence of crime. Murder rates were about even in all states, regardless if they had the death penalty. And also, there is about 3 to 5 people every year that are exonerated from death row based on new evidence found that proves their innocence. So if that many people are being found innocent after the fact, you can only imagine how many people we may have put to death over the years who never actually committed the crime.
Some examples of the death penalty are Patrick Kennedy. Louisiana court convicted Patrick Kennedy of raping an 8-year-old stepdaughter. In Louisiana, the law allows the district attorney to seek the death penalty if the victim is under the age of 12. It was decided that he would receive the death penalty on June 25th, 2008. The Coker versus Georgia case. In the year 1974, Elric Anthony Coker was serving a number of sentences like murder, rape, kidnapping, and assault. He escaped the same year. He broke into a Georgia home and raped a woman, then stole their car. He was sentenced to death on June 29th, 1977. Carlos De Luna case. A local woman was stabbed while on the job at a gas station. They found De Luna under a truck avoiding police because he was on parole and he had been drinking in public that night. Kevin Baker confirmed that De Luna was the man, that the police told him that he was the right guy. He was the right guy. The police told him that he was the guy. On December 7th, 1989, Carlos De Luna was executed. There was a possibility that De Luna did not commit the crime.
We hope you learned something about the death penalty, and have a good night.